Good morning to our viewers and listeners today. DG, thank you so much for your time and for making it to SkyConnect Dialogue. It's a pleasure to host you today. Most welcome.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Today is going to be another session where we are going to discuss a number of issues, basically 4 issues touching on the state of the industry recovery. And then we will look at some elements of the single African air transport market. We look at whether safety and security going forward, what the situations will be, and then matters pertaining to the environment. But before we get started, ladies and gentlemen, our guest, as is always, you have the opportunity to participate in this dialogue by sending us your questions or comments, if you have any, as the discussion unfolds. Please put them through the Q&A tab or the chat box, and at the appropriate time, I would be able to bring them up for the response or for sharing with everyone if they are just comments. So we look forward to your active participation, even as my guests and myself are engaged in this discussion. We do look forward to you enjoying it. This discussion is going to last approximately 1 hour, not more. And within the 1 hour space, we'll try to cover as much ground as it's possible. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is none other than the Director General of the Rwanda Civil Aviation Authority, in person of Mr. Silas Udahemuka. He has been one very passionate aviation enthusiast on the African continent, having done so much not only for aviation in Rwanda, but aviation across Africa, and contributed significantly beyond the borders of Africa to global aviation development. Today, Silas is the president of the African Civil Aviation Commission Bureau, and in that capacity, he collaborates with other civil aviation authorities under the auspices of AFCAC to ensure there's alignment, there's consistency in the policies and programs that AFCAC is pursuing to ensure African aviation takes its rightful place in the Committee of Airspace Users. Ladies and gentlemen, without much ado, we'll delve into our discussions right away. So, Mr. Silas, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Raphael.
Now, before we get started, I'm not too sure if all our guests know you. A majority definitely would know you, but probably there might be a few that probably might need to know you a bit more. So if you can just in a minute or so, just tell us briefly about who Silas is. Thank you.
I believe you have exhaustively done the piece of introducing me, but I'm the director of Rwanda Civil Aviation Authority for the last 8 years. Before then, I was the Deputy Director General of Civil Aviation in charge of operations. At that time, the CAA was together with ANS and airports. And yeah, that's who I am. The brief short of it, that's who I am. And I'm currently serving as the chairman of the Bureau, the president of the Bureau of AFCAC, the African Civil Aviation Commission. Yeah, that's in a brief who I am.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for that brief introduction. A man of few but powerful words. Thank you very much. Now, let's go back a bit to the period of COVID. COVID actually has been a major disruptor of African aviation. Prior to COVID, Africa was growing in leaps and bounds in the aviation sector. And we were all very positive. All the projections were on the positive trajectory. Unfortunately, COVID struck. And there were a lot of measures, some desperate, some well coordinated, to try and get out of COVID. Finally, after 2 years, we are beginning to see the industry get back on track. We are not there yet. I just want you to share with us what has been your experience as a Director General of Civil Aviation during this COVID period, and what lessons should we be learning?
It's been a very interesting experience, an experience that has only mutated. Previous experiences have been carrying different facets, not only for Rwanda aviation, but also continental aviation as Africa. The aviation industry in Africa has been facing so many challenges over time. Maybe this one manifested itself as the most complicated and devastating phenomena that the industry has faced. But we have lived with these challenges. We have lived with political instability, we have lived with poor governance, we have lived with mismanagement of the resources at the industry. And only COVID came in to exacerbate the problem. But good enough, the African aviation industry has survived and gotten out of this problem. The most challenging aspect would be, are we able to determine if we have actually exhaustively determined the effects of COVID on aviation industry? We may not have been able to exhaustively see the impact, the extent to which COVID has affected or will affect our industry. Lessons learned are that we need to be resilient. Maybe we are prepared on the baseline of the previous challenges that we met. So the forecast that we made us survive was basically anchored or informed on the previous experiences. So we need to have a wider perspective and always be prepared for the unexpected. But the bigger lesson then is what countries are doing on the continent, being able to deal with the pandemic and be able to readily avail testing kits, vaccination, and we are seeing things happening on the continent. There are about 5 countries who are now going to establish vaccine manufacturing. And the other thing that we are learning as a lesson is not only on the continent, but even beyond. We are seeing countries who laid off staff, and it is becoming very difficult now to get them back on the job after the resurgence and recovery of the industry. So the list is very long, but we need to learn how to be resilient.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, resilience indeed we need to, and if there's nothing that we have learned from COVID, we need to have very solid shock absorbers that should the similar incident ever recur, we are ready to deal with it decisively. In fact, you mentioned about vaccine manufacturing, and I think a couple of weeks, 2 weeks or so back, there was a groundbreaking for the construction of one of the vaccine facility in Rwanda. And this is good news for the continent, and we're hoping that our governments have learned lessons from COVID and would say never again should we have that situation, and that we would always prepare ourselves adequately. You also talked about job losses, and job losses is becoming a crisis. As we speak today, in many parts of Europe, the airlines are being asked to scale down on their operations because the airports and service providers don't just have the human resource to support the many flights that are being laid on during this summer season. And considering that it doesn't just take a day to get an airline professional to start working, you cannot just go out there and hire. You need to hire, train, certify in some cases, license in others before they can actually perform. So this is becoming a big issue. So in the context of Africa, how do you think, already we are always struggling with staff development issues. Now, if other regions begin to fall on us to meet their capacity shortfall, how are we going to survive?
Well, even before COVID, we've experienced exodus of skilled staff. This is only going to be even worse. So we need to safeguard the little small workforce, skilled workforce that we have on the market. And the leadership of the industry should be on the forefront and assure the staff that we are here to work together and make the industry survive. It's not an easy challenge, and it's going to vary from country to country. And the easiest way is to offer incentives, to educate our workforce that, look, what you can find here may not be as big as you expect to get from the other side. What is bigger and valuable is the effort our people put into the growth of this industry. It's about us, and it has to make it rebound and work. So, and it cannot only be done by the main players in the industry across the board, all government departments, the legal infrastructure, the entire labor authorities. So we must come together as stakeholders and mobilize our. So, like you said, we are going to see an exodus, but we need concerted efforts. We have seen exodus in medical skills. We have seen exodus in not only aviation. So it's a wake-up call to us that it's going to be even worse, and we need to double our effort.
Wow, we need to double our efforts. You know, a few years, a while back, actually, not a few years, a while back, you know, there was a huge exodus of pilots from Africa, particularly to the Middle East, and it created a big worry for AFRAA and AFRAA members. And then AFRAA came up with this proposal to the African Union that, similar to what pertains in the football arena, where, look, if I have a staff and you think the person is good enough and you want him, you come and buy him, give me back some money, I start to develop others, or I also buy others and groom again. You know, we went all the way to the African Union, but unfortunately we were told, no. In this world, labor is mobile, it's freely mobile, and you cannot restrict labor for movement. So our proposal of going the football route will not fly. And that was how that idea died, you know. But I think that there's a need to do something really different to protect the labor, because today we see that in some countries, they don't even want to develop, to train their own people at all. They would rather wait for you to train, get them to make all the mistakes in your airline, and once they are proficient, they come and take them. What do you think?
Yeah, you are very right. But you see, either way we win. Because if I train my people and you take them and pay them well, that's a plus, because these citizens are earning a living, and by extension, the economy is going to be growing. I wouldn't have a problem seeing the exodus. But if you want to keep your people, don't keep them because of the salary. The most important thing that an employee wants is to associate with success. Successful organizations will retain their staff. It's not about pay, not about pay. And so for us, some of us believe that it's open. Like you said, free labor market. Let people move where they are paid highly. If you are able to pay as high as the other guys, do it and keep them. But pay does not retain staff. It's success that retains staff. staff and an environment in an organization. So that's what we should build for. If an airline is very corrupt, if an airline is not focused, if an airline is not caring about her people and her entire staff, staff will go regardless of how much money you pay them. And if an airline or an organization is successful in her meager way of running business, staff will stay. So it's once again a function of managers. It's our responsibilities as managers to keep this staff around.
That's very powerful. Successful organizations have the highest potential to retain their staff. And the second point I'm picking from here is that even if these staff go away for better remuneration, for better opportunities, they still have the ability to support themselves, their families, and in some cases repatriate funds, foreign currency, to help their own countries and economies. So it's not a total loss.
Correct, because aviation is not operating in isolation.
Yes.
Aviation is one but a piece of the entire economic setup. So if people can boost your economy by going outside your country and earn more money and repatriate the earnings, the economy is gaining. So either way, you are winning.
Yes.
But then the important thing here is then you should be able to have capacity to retrain, to recruit, to equip your staff with adequate skills and knowledge that the industry deserves, so that you are on a timely basis able to fill the gaps that are being created by this exodus. That's the capacity we need to create on the continent.
Yes, in fact, and that capacity is very critical. It's very, very critical to our survival and our success. And that leads to my next point, which is, during the COVID period, as I indicated in my introduction, there were a lot of discussions led by the African Union, the African Civil Aviation Commission, Africa CDC. We had a lot of meetings, very well coordinated, leading to a high-level meeting organized by the African Union, at which very significant decisions were made, particularly with regards to supporting the African aviation industry. And I recall at the time, some $25 to $30 billion was what we estimated the industry would need to survive and prosper through the pandemic. Unfortunately, the industry in Africa only received cash and non-cash support to the equivalent of some just $2 billion. This is compared to the global industry support of over 256 billion. Now, so if we have to build our own capacity, and now we're not getting the support during the most toughest of time, and when we emerge, now we are less competitive than our competitors from elsewhere, isn't it?
We've always been less competitive, not only in aviation, but in so many other sectors. And so the playing ground is not leveled in great measure. It's not leveled. Start from, look at all cost centers of running aviation business and tell me which cost center is found on the continent. Much as we've got the potential to have it. So look at the original equipment manufacturers, OEMs. Look at the naval aids equipment manufacturers. Look at Jet A1 suppliers, the entire chain supply. Look at the maintenance organizations. Airlines fly 9-8 hours out of the continent to go to their routine maintenance. Look at their variable simulators, the entire list, The playground is not leveled. Also look at the financing institutions and the terms of financing the business. They are not leveled. So COVID has only exacerbated the problem. So we only need to style up and see if we can. Then the issue of saying that the rest of the world is getting 250 plus billion in support and Africa is getting 2 billion. That's the ratio. That's how it is. The volumes of the other guys is bigger in magnitude. So we are getting what is equal to our measure. So it's up to us. It's up to us to learn how to style up and raise our bar a little bit.
Wow. So now if we cannot raise our bar, then it means we are out of this business.
Well, the fact that we have stayed this far means that we are resilient. The African aviation industry has struggled for all this time. That means there is an element of resilience. We only need to amplify it. We only need to amplify it. And there are ways of doing that. And there are ways of doing that. And for example, are we able to have financial firms that are geared and biased towards supporting aviation industry on favorable terms, like the Northern Hemisphere aviation industry is enjoying, the terms they are enjoying? You can't compete with European aviation industry. Pick any airline from European region, and the terms of financing they are benefiting from or they are enjoying with the same airlines on the continent in Africa here who go and pick from the same banks at different rates and with much difficulty. In most cases, we go to our banks on the continent whose interests are extremely very high. So it's definitely an unleveled playground, and we need to figure out how to do this. Are we able, for example, to establish regional MLOs? You have, say you spread them across the continent, and maybe AU supports AFRAA and others. Are we able to have centers of excellence, training centers of excellence for pilots and engineers? Mention it. So we need to learn how to pick much from the little that we have by synergizing our efforts.
So in other words, I'm hearing from you, because the African Development Bank is currently working towards establishing a leasing platform on the African continent to make it much more easier, much more competitive for African operators to be able to lease aircrafts right on the continent here, instead of going elsewhere where the risk profile of our country and our continent is grossly exaggerated, and which is factored into the price of whatever lease we might be asking for. The plan is that this will bring it down. So this is on the right course, is it?
That should be, and but they should involve the key stakeholders, the airline of AOC's aviation, the entire aviation landscape. They should be involved and heard before they go to the final course of the program.
Yeah, in fact, the African Development Bank is doing a very wide consultation on this. They started with engaging with airlines, they engaged with states, and they've got views from various stakeholder groups. Then they got a consultant to do a study. The study was presented back to multi-sectoral stakeholders for review, and the process is ongoing. So I think they're making sure that they do something that fits into the needs of this industry and something that will really support the industry to the best of its ability and get it to thrive and survive. So that's something very looking at.
It's a very brilliant and noble idea to pursue. I hope we see it to its logical conclusion.
Yeah, talking about the MROs and centers of excellence, you know, the challenge we have as Africans is everybody always wants to have their own, rather than us establishing something jointly or supporting what already exists. How can we ensure that if we already have a couple of MROs on the continent, how can we make the best use of these MROs? How can we support to grow these MROs rather than build or add on to what we have and all of them operating at less than optimum capacity?
Yeah, maybe we should make maximum use of the LECs, the regional economic communities, and sell these ideas to the communities rather than opening up to the entire continent. Otherwise, you are going to, but also a few states who would be willing to put together their resources and harmonize and synergize. That should be the start point, other than opening up wider and wider on the entire continent. The buy-in may not be as forthcoming as starting it smaller step towards achieving a bigger dream.
So as we conclude on this subject, what would be your focus of the African industry performance this year and beyond? Because AFRAA statistics indicate that as at the end of last month, on the regional level, the industry had only recovered about 69% of what the industry was doing, airlines were doing in 2019. So we still have about 31% more recovery to do. At the continental level, the recovery is about 92%. And so we still have another 8% at the intercontinental level to do. Now, what is your focus of the industry performance going forward?
I strongly believe if all factors remain constant, the pre-COVID situation will be realized, say, by next year, end of next year or early 2024, if all factors remain constant. And I don't want to be very optimistic. I know COVID seems to be receding. I hope it stays away from us. But even largely because we have been able to vaccinate most of our population. Most countries have vaccinated. And we have got enormous support from AUC has mobilized the African Development Bank, like you know, and they put aside a facility of about 3 billion. So we should be able to survive, and we encourage the industry to take advantage of that facility that has been mobilized by AUC through African Development Bank. And then we continue to train and reposition ourselves.
And like they say, when trouble comes, it comes in droves. So COVID is not over yet, and then we have the Russia-Ukraine war, which has got a spillover on the aviation sector and the general African economies. Do you think it's likely to slow down recovery?
Well, for Ukraine, I don't know. For Ukraine, I don't know. But we have lived with these problems. We have only failed to learn from these problems, which is what it is meant to be. Normally beaten once, twice shy, but we are being beaten so many times, and we fail to get shy. But for the Ukraine, I don't know. I don't know about Ukraine and the effect to our industry. This is a business. We tend to put or to demonstrate aviation challenges in isolation of others on the continent. But you know, flying people and goods is a business because you invest, it is capital intensive, it is workforce intensive, you invest in a lot of people, but you need very good managerial and lean management of the resources. So the other aspect of it is aviation should be looked at as an enabler. So when the Ukraine war starts and people are crying about scarcity of wheat flour, governments are finding alternatives for their people. So we should equally look at aviation as an enabler to other, and as a utility, as an infrastructure, like we build roads, like we build railway lines, to allow people who are trading to carry their goods and services and make people connect to increase productivity. So it is important that the governments come in and support aviation and look at aviation as an infrastructure, a basic utility, like internet, like electricity, like water. Because it's only during COVID that we realized how it's very important to be together as a family and friends, to be able to travel and make your business work. So it's like lacking power, electricity for your industry. So we need to make a loud call to governments to consider. Some governments are doing that. I'll give you an example of our government. Rwanda takes aviation as one of the key flagship projects. And we encourage other governments to look at aviation in the same perspective.
You know, that is really what we ought to do. Look at aviation as infrastructure. And I do hope that what we all saw during the COVID period, that in the absence of aviation, movement of essential drugs, essential personnel, logistics, and other things that we needed to fight the virus would have been so difficult to move around this continent, but for aviation. And I just want to believe that our governments will always reflect on this and say that, no, we need to keep this industry as resilient and as strong as ever, because it will come in handy to support us.
I'm in total agreement. I'm in total agreement.
Now, having said that, safety and security in Africa. Prior to COVID, we were doing very well in this area. In fact, the statistics were improving significantly. We had quite a good number of African states having attained the 60% plus level of that ICAO had set as a benchmark. Now, we still had a few countries that were still lagging behind, but majority of them were making strides. Now, COVID came, and now there's lack of resources, not only at the industry level, but at the country level, because governments have other priorities, some of them more pressing probably than aviation. And we are seeing not so much focus in the area of safety and security. But this area is very critical in order that Africa doesn't go back to what it was in the 80s, where we were thought of as an aviation graveyard. What should we be doing? What should, the industry and governments, what should we be doing to ensure that we don't sidetrack?
We need to stay focused. We need to determine our targets. We need to set our goals. We need to find place for aviation in whatever we are doing. Does aviation have a place in our strategic plans as a nation, as a regional economic community? And then we keep monitoring that we are achieving the milestones we have set out to achieve. So first of all, you have to recognize the importance of aviation in whatever we are doing. And like you rightly put it was very evident that much couldn't be done without the role of aviation. So we need to keep monitoring on the ladder the targets that we shall have set to achieve our broader goals.
So if I may, who do you think we should put the burden of monitoring and focusing on ensuring that we remain on track? Who should do that?
No, let me tell you, if you want to know the importance of aviation and who should do exactly that monitoring, you wake up and cross Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. You wake up and cross Jacksonville Atlanta Airport overnight. you wake up and close Heathrow Airport, you will answer yourself, who should heed to that call? And that's how we should look at aviation as Africa.
Excellent. Very, very classic response. Thank you so much for that. Now, I at this point, I would want us to switch perspective a bit and talk about the single African air transport market. Another very key project that has so much potential for the betterment of African aviation and African citizens in general. You know, you recall this was signed in 2018. The commitment was made establishing the single African air transport market in 2018, and since then a lot of work has gone on. Now there was a solemn commitment, and we have so far some 35 countries have signed the solemn commitment. Last week I was told now 21 of those countries have further signed the memorandum of implementation, and 10 of them have fully implemented the concrete measures and are ready like yesterday for opening up their markets. Now, but my first concern is, why are the other 20 countries not signed up yet?
Yeah, you know, countries have got varying opportunities, I mean, priorities. And I believe that is where the problem lies. Not every country on the continent gives aviation the priority it deserves in equal measure. And I strongly believe those who are the 20 countries that have fully committed and the 10 that are already compliant with the concrete measures are those countries that have identified the importance of aviation as an enabler to the economies of their respective countries. So it's a matter of time. It's a matter of time, and this should be reflected in the way we develop our regulations and laws. If you want to see a country that has put aviation at the forefront, go investigate into their laws and regulations. Laws that cover taxation, laws that cover liberalization, laws that you go and investigate their laws and regulations. But that is why AUC is there. SAATM has been identified as one of the flagship projects for the Agenda 2063. And I know they are doing a credible job. So we only need to remain focused and keep mobilizing as many countries as we can, both at AUC and AFCAC as the executing agents for the continent. But there are so many other priorities that countries are engaged into, and they give very little attention. One thing we have learned in the recent past is not even many states, systems, government departments know about SAATM. So we need to educate ourselves about SAATM. Unfortunately, it's been here since 1988. It's over 40 years, close to half a century. It's very unfortunate that that's the situation. But we don't need to give up. We must continue mobilizing ourselves and our other colleagues.
Now, so the 35 that have signed, I'm always wondering, because the AFRAA's estimation is that these 35 account for over 82% of the intra-Africa traffic. So literally, we only have just some 18% of traffic to deal with of the states, the 20 other states. My question is, why are we not seeing actual rollout of SAATM? Is there something else that we ought to be doing that we are not doing?
Yes, there is what we can do. I'll give you an example of what happened in the East African region when some of the programs were moving very slow in the implementation. So a number of states picked on certain programs that they found very important. Like, for example, one area network, telecoms coming together. So there was some resistance in the beginning, but a few countries in the East African community decided to go one network, and it worked. So the concept of the coalition of the willing should be encouraged. Those who are willing to move forward, they should continue moving forward together, and maybe it will encourage others who have stayed behind to come and join the bandwagon and move on. Those who are willing, the 35, the 20, the 10, they should move on and implement the SAATM as we continue to mobilize along the way the other remaining steps.
Yeah, but would you think that we should look at, just like the EAC example you gave of telecom? Because last week I was learning that when EAC decided to break down the telecom barriers across countries, and the few countries came together, in no time, traffic grew by over 900% because the tariffs were lower and demand just exploded. So even today, those who initially were not very positively disposed towards the barrier have come back and have joined. So the club, they're ready and willing, as you're talking about here. That should be the way to go. But do you think that also for SAATM, the implementation should be right from the REX level, or we should just take it from the continental level?
I believe from the REX level would work perfectly very well. You bite what you can chew and swallow. You start with the REX and see how it works. And I'm very optimistic it would work. And I saw someone in the chat saying if one is ready to be part of the coalition, 101% we are ready.
Hmm. Well, okay, at this point, let me go online and see what our viewers are posting. I've got something here from Abdul Bigurum Wami. He says, in line with African Union, is the civil aviation under African Union thought or considered to have one single aviation like Europe? Okay, so in other words, I think the point is that, are we considering an EASA sort of arrangement where you have a regulator which regulates the entire continent? And since you are president of AFCAC, I think this is why this question is being posted to you. Under the AU, are we considering having one regulator, like similar to EASA?
That would be most ideal. And it would be the desire of AFCAC, and I believe AUC, to have a harmonized oversight entity. But I also, like I said earlier, I believe we should start with LSOs. We already have got LSOs who are not doing badly, but who need to improve. So if the LSOs do very well, it would be a good foundation or stepping stone for the ultimate continental equivalent to EASA.
Good. So RSOs are critical. We need to strengthen those ones, get them to work better, and we could leapfrog on that to actually get a unified airspace.
Correct.
Now the second question from Adil Jalil is that most old aircraft from the West are literally dumped on Africa. What are we doing to control this trend?
Once again, it's about our policies and laws. They do not only dump aircraft on the market. They dump clothes, they dump shoes, all the shoes, they dump all the cars. So it's up to us to set our standards and say this is what we need on a minimum. It's up there. No one is putting a gun on our head to buy junk aircraft. It's a willing buyer and a willing seller. So you should decide on what should be the measure of our quality and the standards that govern our industry. If you want junk aircraft, we shall get them. They are print on the market. If you want good aircraft, they are all over. Airbus, Boeing, Embraer, and others would be willing to say this is a new aircraft.
Yes, that's really true. Now there's another one here from, I can't see the name, this is in the chat box, but it says that he thinks that airlines are actually the blame of not having integrated MROs and utilizing them well lies squarely with airlines, because it's impossible for us to have 54 MROs across the continent, and therefore it's necessary that we utilize the MROs that exist currently on the continent. This is just a comment. I think we are all agreed on that.
Yes, we are in agreement.
Okay, so I think these are the first set of comments. Let's go back to our series. I now want us to talk briefly about the environment. You know, as the discussion gets exciting, then time is flying. So let's talk briefly about the environment. You know, another critical component of the future of this industry hinges on the environment and how all of us collectively, not only in aviation, but every facet of human activity contributes towards environmental sustainability. Fortunately, in the aviation space, we've got CORSIA, which is being in the works. I don't know, what is the state of readiness of the African states towards the next ICAO Assembly, which is a couple of months away?
Oh, yes, in a week's time, AFCAC will convene her plenary, extraordinary plenary. And among other things, we are going to look at a number of working papers. And then we agree on our position as a continent before we go to ICAO this September, towards the end of September, early October. So then I will speak to that after we have agreed on our common position for each working paper. I know we are looking at the entire scope, from environment to air navigation services, safety, air transport. So in a week's time, we shall be meeting in Dakar to deliberate over these working papers. But I will tell you that 20 African countries are already members of CORSIA. They have committed to us on a voluntary basis to participate in CORSIA.
Yes.
And it's not a small number. That's about 36% of the African member states.
Yeah, that is very commendable. That we've got 20 African countries already participating in the voluntary phase. Now, but what I gather is that the initial thinking that to establish the CORSIA baseline, we were going to rely on 2019 emission data is no longer tenable, because some countries, particularly in the developed world, are not in favor of just using 2019 data. They want a combination of 2019 and 2020, the average of 2019 and 2020 as the baseline. Now, what I also know is that some countries, particularly in the developing world, are opposed to this position, this new position of 50-50 from 2019-2020. And the reason is simple. Just like we discussed earlier on, during COVID, states supported their aviation industry at different levels and to different extents. That impacted the emissions of airlines within that period. Some emitted more and some emitted literally nothing, next to nothing. So if you are going to do the average, some states' baseline will be much lower than expected. So I'm not too sure at the personal level, at an African level, as leader of AFCAC plenary, as the president of AFCAC plenary. What are your thoughts on this? Should we still go by the 2019, which was what we all were sort of literally, informally agreed we were going to go with, or this new approach would serve Africa better?
No, what you are saying is absolutely right. I will find it very difficult to give you my opinion here now, because this is one of the areas we are going to be discussing about in 1 week's time. And I don't want to bias any of the listeners who will be in the meeting in Dakar, but we have picked this one, and it's one of the subjects that we are going to discuss, so that we have a common understanding before we go to the General Assembly.
Okay, that's good. So we look forward to hearing the outcome of the assembly, of the plenary, sometime after next week, when you have to be done with that meeting. Now, my other question has to do with the European Emission Trading Scheme. You will recall when discussions on the CORSIA were being led by ICAO, the EU decided to pause the EU ETS, as it was called in those days. And they said they had stopped the clock so that ICAO would come up with a global solution for emission trading. Now, the EU had set a deadline of 2023 for ICAO to come up with a global solution. Otherwise, the EU ETS comes into play. We are just around the corner into 2023. What do you think should happen if ICAO at its next assembly is not able to arrive at a consensus on CORSIA?
Yeah, I know the emission trading scheme is one that triggered the creation of CORSIA. And you are right, it's around the corner. The stop clock is around the corner. And like I answered earlier, this is one of the areas we're going to discuss. And we are engaging with our European counterparts. We have had an extensive discussion with them. They have been very supportive in training African environmental experts, and it's ongoing. It's an ongoing dialogue until the next General Assembly. We shall have agreed on how we move forward.
Thank you so much. Now let me go back to I think I have two more questions here. Adil Jalil again says that to minimize the impact on cost of travel, pollution, and avoid undesirable mushroom growth. Oh, I think it's actually still part of the first point where he says all aircrafts are being dumped on the African continent. So the other question is from Josiah Bakobi. What do you think having an African ANSP to support an African ANSP support association or agency that will address ANS challenges and projects on the regional level? We want to know what are your thoughts? We need to have a regional ANSP support association so that we can look at the ANSP issues at a regional or continental level.
Yeah, we need to build on what is in place now. We have ATNS in the southern part of the continent. We have ASECNA in the west central, and now partly northern region. So it would be ideal if we built on these two that are already in place instead of reinventing the wheel. But like any other facet of socio-economic development, the more we synergize, harmonize, and get together, the more we reap out of it. So if he has got any proposal for NSP, he is free to send a working paper to us and we shall give it due consideration.
Great. So Josiah, you hear from the DG. If you have any proposals on how we can do this, please send your proposals to either AFRAA or to AFCAC, and then it will be presented to the bureau, and they will look at it and possibly adapt it for implementation. Now, another participant who is anonymous is saying, is Rwanda keen to be part of the coalition of the willing and ready states to implement SAATM?
101%, I say. 101%.
Wow. Yeah. How come this person even doubted this?
No, Rwanda is one of the 10 countries you mentioned that have completed all the concrete measures.
That's right. So you're fully ready and open to any operations that want to come to Rwanda should feel free to come around.
Correct.
Now, another question from Victoria Moores. She says, how does Africa need to develop its MRO capabilities? What capabilities are lacking and what projects are underway to support this development? Would you be in a position to answer this? This has to do with MROs. What are the capabilities that are lacking? And how do we get about developing these capabilities?
Yeah, once again, an MRO, like any other aviation aspect, is a capital-intensive investment. So it's a function of equipment and skills. If you have got skilled maintenance engineers and you have got adequate equipment or infrastructure, then you are good to go. And there's market for that.
Great. No, that's it. So I mean, there's a huge market not only on the continent, but even across continents. And I recall that AFRAA is actually working with an organization called the UTD to develop enough capacity to be able to support MRO activities, not only on the continent, but actually also in North America and Europe. And UTD is busy engaging with operators outside of Africa to see if their maintenance support can actually be from the African continent, especially in the wake of capacity shortage globally. This is a very, very interesting development, and AFRAA is taking it very seriously with UTD. Now, all too soon, we have just 1 minute for our time to run out. And before I thank our guest, Mr. Silas, I would want to give you an opportunity to give us your final thoughts. What is your final message to the aviation community across the continent, to our governments? What should they be doing? And to any other stakeholder that is in this space? Any message?
Well, like I said earlier, governments who are not responsive to supporting aviation should heed to this call. It's one engine that starts so many other engines of the economies. And we need to embrace technology. We need to acknowledge that aviation industry is a knowledge industry. It's you know or you do not know. And therefore, we should establish training capabilities and infrastructure in sufficient measure on the continent, and also embrace technology, use of technology as we advance ourselves into this industry. But most importantly, we continue to encourage AUC and other stakeholders to support reasonable financing systems on the continent that are biased and geared towards aviation industry, and also give incentives to aerospace and aviation investment on the continent. I know Rwanda will not hesitate to roll out an incentive, a broad range of incentives to whoever would want to invest in aerospace and aviation in Rwanda. So we encourage other states to do the same. And that way we shall see ourselves. Aviation, even a few airlines that we have on the continent, you go and do an investigation and see of their fleet, what belongs to them. So it's important that we invest in financing of aviation and in development of and maintenance on the continent. That would be my own last.
Thank you very much. These are very key recommendations and advice, both to governments to heat and support the industry. We need to embrace technology in all its facets, and over and above, we need to develop our capacity, because the industry is a knowledge industry, and you either know or you don't know. There's no middle ground. So if you know, you do well. You don't know, you'll hang around messing yourself up and thinking you're making progress. On behalf of AFRAA, on behalf of all our listeners here, I would want to thank you so much, the DG and President of AFCAC Bureau, for taking this afternoon to share some thoughts with us on AFRAA SkyConnect. We're most grateful for your participation, and we thank you sincerely for the knowledge and information that you have shared with us today. Thank you very much, and on behalf of everyone, we wish you a very nice day and a nice week ahead. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Bye.